The Empire, long divided, must unite. A great dynasty burns, and tyrants rule over the ashes. As the light dims, shadows grow ever darker. Ambition corrupts the future, and harmony shatters in the flames of turmoil. Yet from the cinders, the powerful and righteous emerge. The Empire, long united, must divide, and destiny be shaped by its champions.
Well, this came as quite a shock to me today, but what a good piece of news it was. It is happening, people. Three Kingdoms Total War is on the way, and it's dropping in the fall of 2018. CA needs to slow that roll, man. They are out of control with the amount of content they're releasing and hyping up right now, and I'm in love with it. I just hope that they're not biting off more than they can chew. But the next historical release is all about China, an incredibly vibrant piece of history, heavily romanticized by, you guessed it, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, a turbulent period made famous by that wildly popular novel, one of the most beloved works of East Asian literature in history, and of course, the Dynasty Warriors series of games. In the 3rd century AD, the ruling Han dynasty became increasingly corrupt as government officials and large landowners lined their pockets at the expense of the peasant class. Nothing new there. Widespread flooding and a general sense of anger and malaise became widespread, leading to the Yellow Turban Rebellion, a peasant revolt which ravaged the countryside for close to 2 decades. In the power vacuum left in its wake, Dong Zhuo, a warlord and tyrant with a powerful army at his back, took power. And this is where Three Kingdoms Total War begins, in the wake of the Yellow Turban Rebellion, as Yuan Shao leads a coalition against his tyranny, and soon after the three houses of Wei, Wu, and Shu Han strengthen their positions and fight in a bloody civil war for the imperial throne. The trailer even has the incredibly iconic, if likely fictional, Oath of the Peach Garden, where Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Zhang Fei came together as brothers to protect the Han Empire and would later become the leading figures in the rise of Shu Han. We have come together as brothers. From this day forward, we shall join forces for a common purpose, to save the troubled and to aid the endangered. We shall avenge the nation above and pacify the citizenry below. We seek not to be born on the same day, in the same month, and in the same year. We merely hope to die on the same day, in the same month, and in the same year. May the gods of heaven and earth attest to what is in our hearts. If we should ever do anything to betray our friendship, may heaven and the people of the earth both strike us dead. Perhaps didn't end ideally for them in the end, but they definitely all ended up dying at some point, so that part of their oath was most certainly fulfilled. Hashtag Team Wei. And of course, this game will detail the rise of Cao Cao and Wu China as well. This has a massive amount of potential, and I'm personally incredibly excited for it. It's true, unit and cultural variety will be smaller than something like Rome 2 or Attila, certainly more homogeneous than some of the previous historical releases, and nowhere near the size or scope of something like Medieval 2. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Shogun 2 Total War is arguably the most polished game in the entire series, and CA has proven that they can create fantastic atmosphere and gameplay in a more focused setting. As me and Italian Spartacus were discussing the other day, the period is filled to the brim with colorful characters, brilliant strategists, powerful warlords, and badass warriors, and they will go a long way in helping to differentiate this game from any other Total War in history. People like Lu Bu, often depicted as an erratic and temperamental leader, but a terrifying warrior, basically the Grimgor Ironhide of the entire setting. Characters like Sima Yi, a general and government official who paved the way for the Jin Dynasty after masterful defenses of the Wei Dynasty, and like Liu Bei, often portrayed as a paragon of virtue, honor, and kindness, and a hero to the people, and his 5 tiger generals of Shuhan, including Zhao Yun. And then there are people like Meng Huo, who spam Nan-Man elephant stacks at you until you die, and Zhu Rong, who probably didn't even exist, but is simply too much of a smoke show not to include. I'm sure that's a very accurate historical representation of ancient indigenous people in southwest China, but there we go. And there's so much that can be done with these characters from a campaign and gameplay perspective, and that is one thing that has me really excited. One of the things that really gets me pumped is the potential, especially in a more focused setting like this one, for CA to both up the complexity of the campaign compared to the Warhammer series, but also give us many of the great options from that trilogy. More customization, more legendary lord personalization, more exciting technology trees that really make each faction stand out and feel more unique. There have certainly been some criticisms of Warhammer that the campaign is too dumbed down, and though I don't necessarily agree, I understand where they're coming from. I find some of the Empire managing elements from games like Attila redundant, repetitive, unstrategic, and unnecessary for good gameplay, but I do think there's a balance that can be struck between adding strategic elements while also making them fun and engaging, rather than completely unappealing and unfun like, say, Squalor management from Attila. And there's definitely a balance to be struck between what has been implemented in Warhammer Fantasy and what has been implemented in the historical games that preceded it. I think Three Kingdoms China is a perfect place to add some of the new additions from the Warhammer series while maintaining the core strategic elements that make people love Medieval 2, and yes, even Attila. And as always, this all gives me some hope that we might actually get to see the return of Avatar Conquest, especially given the fact that it's mostly one culture type. I've talked about it at length before, of course, but it was an amazing game mode that added so much replayability and longevity to multiplayer, and I think that's something that will be desperately needed in a game like this. And it also begs the question, how far will CA take the fantasy elements for this game? I'd venture to guess not that far. It's being advertised as a historical title for a reason, and I'm sure that's what it will be at its core. But at the same time, the mythos of this time period is one closely tied to powerful warriors and larger-than-life characters, so it's fair to wonder if it'll be going for the Warhammer style of single individuals like Lu Bu, wading into the thick of the fighting and slaughtering everyone. It will almost certainly be toned down compared to something like Warhammer, but Three Kingdoms is literally a perfect place to throw in a few fantasy elements and what they've learned from Total War Warhammer into a historical setting, and I think you can rest assured legendary figures like Lu Bu and Guan Yu are going to kick some serious ass in melee combat. Now, I'm obviously not arguing that they should be able to solo tank armies or anything that ridiculous, but a bit more vicious in melee and a bit more survivable than your typical historical general from campaign, absolutely. And I think it's also fair to guess that they'll be going for legendary lords that can't technically die, like in Warhammer, at least for your most iconic characters, and likely functioning as single entities rather than a full unit on the battlefield, although small groups of elite bodyguards with heroes at the helm could honestly work as well. I would really want them to be quite a bit stronger than your traditional general's bodyguard from other historical games though. Nothing would feel worse than to see Zhao Yun, for example, lead a charge into the teeth of a Wu formation just to die 5 seconds later. And certainly, I think there's some opportunity for more unique battlefield abilities, stuff that's a bit more noticeable and impactful than Rally plus 15 morale. Shogun 2 had some pretty cool ones, with Warcry and the naval bombardments from Fall of the Samurai. Now, river warfare was a huge component of Three Kingdoms warfare and will be a great way to combine land and naval combat into a single gorgeous battlefield. Many of the ships at the time were huge and powerfully built, able to hold entire regiments of cavalry or infantry, and unlike Rome 2's naval combat, which focused on ramming and boarding, tactics mostly revolved around ranged combat to kill crew members, so more similar to Shogun 2 in that manner, focusing on the ranged aspect of naval warfare rather than getting up and bashing each other in close quarters combat. And there were also fire ships, which is a pretty awesome addition as well. Professional soldiery was really important during this time period, especially in regards to the lineage of families, as male heirs would receive the armies of their fathers and oftentimes be completely surrounded by veterans with years of combat experience in a particularly bloody period of history. and cavalry played a large role in military strategy as well, as Cao Cao, one of the most iconic warlords of the time period and a central figure of the Wei dynasty, actually conquered a group of Proto-Mongolian people during the run-up to this time period, and they had a reputation for being some of the best horsemen in the Far East. Their horse archers and armored cavalry made a huge impact in the civil war that was to follow. And stirrups may not have been employed just yet, although I believe there is some debate still going on about that, but from a total war perspective, you can definitely bet that will be a part of the technology tree to improve cavalry. Certainly, armies will be more homogeneous and samey compared to something like Rome 2, but with crossbows, the possible, although ahistorical implementation of super early proto-gunpowder weapons, ranks of spearmen and swordsmen, and a beautiful map and siege design in general, and these will be very important, as will the soundtrack, as these kind of things are what need to be absolutely nailed to make up for what some might see as a smaller amount of unit variety and content in that perspective. There's definitely the potential for really engaging combat and a super entertaining strategy game. And like I said, it's very colorful, both from a character perspective and simply from an actual color palette perspective. It's like Shogun 2, I think. If they go for a strong art design and a strong color design, I think it's going to really pop and go out towards people's screens, and I think people are really going to enjoy that aspect of it. And of course, it all gets held together by the larger-than-life and epic characters and strategists of the time period, and I'm personally super excited for it. So happy they announced it, and I'll definitely be covering Three Kingdoms China and this game more in detail in the near future, and look forward to its release in fall of this year. But what are you guys most excited for? Which characters are you most excited for? Which factions? Which features do you really want to see? How do you want to see them improve on the core gameplay in Three Kingdoms China Total War? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you all for watching. Indie Pride, signing out for now.